Us today is Coach Barak Coolman, head boys basketball coach of Valparaiso High School in Valparaiso, Indiana. Coach Coolman is entering his 13th season as head coach, 6th with the Vikings. Coaches at Northrop High School in Fort Wayne prior to moving to Valpo, and he amassed an impressive 201-93 record to go along with 5 sectional titles. Coach is going to talk today about getting players to accept their roles. Coach, thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm just excited to be on this, and obviously all of us are trying to kind of reinvent ourselves. One thing that we're all coaches and we have a desire to teach and impact people, and then right now, how do you coach without a team? And so that's something I'm sure we're all kind of struggling with in a way when obviously we can't be with our guys on a day-to-day basis like we're used to. So, I don't want this just to be kind of the sage on the stage giving lots of just lecturing. I'd definitely like it to be an open, involved question and answer situation. And I'm going to really just speak from my experience and kind of the things that I've learned over the years. I've been coaching for 20 some years now. Obviously this is starting my 13th year as a head coach. I've been fortunate enough to have some really good mentors, and the 2 guys that have probably impacted me the most are Coach Lightfoot, former head coach at Bethel College, and then Coach Rhodes, who I coached for both of them. And so a lot of what I do and what I learned has been gleaned from them or stolen from them or actually given to me by them. But then also I put my own spin on it. And so, a couple of thoughts to begin with. One of my first things I always say is you can't win without good players. But you can lose with good players. And so I think that's a pretty important role. At least I can't win without good players. Maybe somebody else can. But that's been my experience over my 12 years as a head coach. But I've lost some games probably, or even had some seasons end sooner than they should have because of probably my own mistakes or the team chemistry issues. And so that's really the point of this talk, is to kind of show some things that I've done and learned and used over my 12 years as a head coach to help keep the team together. And just some stats for you. At Northrop, we won 3 sectional titles. But if you look at the 3 Februaries leading into those sectionals, my team was 5-10. And so obviously on the kind of verge of imploding, because partly we played such a good schedule, partly because it was just that time of year. And I think every coach can kind of agree that February week at my house, we call it survivalary, where you've got to just try to survive and make it through. But you want to also try to continue to keep the team together. And that's probably the credit to what we did when at Northrop, is to be able to bring the team back together, hold the team together, and then turn things around and win 3 sectionals in a row there. For me at Valpo, my tough time has been Christmas break, where we really hit it hard, but played some really good competition. In my, 5 seasons at Valpo, we are 6-12 over Christmas break. So those are kind of the stretches where I've really seen that my team has been kind of smacked in the face and pushed hard, and kind of at that breaking point where you've had to kind of overcome that adversity and that struggles, I think, has made all my teams stronger. The process of me developing roles is something that I think a lot about. It starts actually in the spring when we do our exit interviews for the next, for the previous seasons, and start trying to help kids get an idea of where we're going with the team, what the team needs, how the teams can fit. I think it's really important to have a key is communication. Okay. One of the quotes I tell my guys all the time is they're all role players. And I think sometimes role players get like a dirty kind of negative concept. Well, I'm just a role player. Well, Brandon Newman was a role player for me. His role was to score 28 points a game, right? But that was his role, and he had to do that job, and he had to do it well. But I think sometimes we don't all want the same role. They all want the same role. They all want to be the Brandon Newmans where they get to be the leading scorer, but that doesn't help the team function and team win. And so when we start sitting down in our exit interviews, we talk about what they do well, what are their strengths, what are, you know, their own personal goals. But I think it's really important that you kind of help kid identify what they're really good at, and then also where the team could need them and use them for the coming season. Okay. And so I always kind of acquaint it to lines. What line are you going to get in? All right. If you want to get in the I'm the shooter line, well, how many people are ahead of you in that line? Okay. And try to help the kids start to see it. And I was like, well, okay, there's 6 kids that are better shooters than you right now, in my opinion. So if that's the line you want to get in, go for it. Okay? But you're going to have to do this, this, and this, and this to beat out those 4 guys that are better shooters you to have that role. Okay. But you're really athletic, you defend really well, and you rebound really well. There's only 2 guys in that line that are ahead of you right now. And so if you start trying to help the kids kind of be able to see and look back and step, I think that helps them in a way, because now it gives them a specific purpose, a specific reason, and also gives them some data to look at. I mean, that's I was fortunate to play at Bethel, and I wasn't a great player there. I was on some really great teams, but when I got there, I was the 16th man on the roster, and Bethel was averaging 100 points a game, and we were winning national championships. And I kind of looked around and said, if I'm going to try to be in the scoring line, I'm going to stay at the 16th man. There's no way I'm going to ever outscore or outshoot any of these guys here, but I want to participate. I want to be a part, and I want to find a role. So I started talking to Coach Lightfoot, hey, what can I do with my skill set, my strengths and weaknesses? And he kind of laid out some ideas for me to what I could do well. And so I kind of embraced that role and said, I'm going to be the defensive stopper and rebounder. And then I jumped to the 8th man as a sophomore, and then kind of floated between the 6th man and started my junior and senior year there playing that role. I would always say Eric Brandon and I would go for 40 points a night. He'd get 38 and I'd get 2. You know, and I was fine with that because I got to play and got to be a part. And I think a lot of kids just want to be a part, but also want to feel valued. And so I think that the next thing you do is you just keep talking about how valuable this role is. Yes, it may not be the glamorous role that maybe your teammate gets or that your parents understand, but if your team understands how important it is, they value it, they know that and there's so many things. And so that's one of the things, if you can continue to validate the guys, the way they will respond is really important, and they can just excel. Let me see. Another kind of pitfall that I've learned from my own mistakes, and I've made a ton of mistakes. I think that's the one thing that clear disclosure, I've been fortunate to have some success, but most of it's been through my own mistakes, and I've learned from them. But when you replace really good classes, okay, so when I talk about at Northrop, the 2013 class was a really good class for me. You know, we had Brenton and Bryson Scott. They scored 3,500 points between the 2 of them, plus a few other guys that were really good. The next year, the 2014 year, I didn't really realize what I'd set myself up for, but so many of those guys that were kind of in waiting, they thought, all right, now it's my turn to be Brenton and Bryson Scott, okay, which hindsight looking back, that's not the case because they were good players, but obviously if they were good enough to be Brenton and Bryson Scott, they would have been playing more or playing significant roles on that 2013 season. So it set us up for a lot of issues because they just thought, well, I'm going to step in and I'm going to score like Bryson and I'm going to shoot like Brenton. Well, that kind of then derailed us because I didn't do a good job of helping them know that, hey, you're not that type of a player. If you were, you would have been playing the last few years with them, but you can help us and you can do something and we could have been successful. So we definitely were young that year. We were trying to rebuild, but also it was a year where there was a lot of frustration because I didn't do a good job of communicating. And so fast forwarding to this year, where last year I had a really good class. I had a great point guard. Obviously, Brandon Newman was second, runner-up to Mr. Basketball, a kid that went to Bethel, Nate Ertz, had a really good class. And then this year, kind of like I knew that same issue was going to come if I didn't get ahead of the storm and start kind of talking to my players early about, hey, this is what you can do. No, you're not going to be Brandon Newman, all right? Even though, yeah, you may be our leading scorer, your leading shooter, you're not going to be Brandon Newman, because if you could have been Brandon Newman, I would have used you last year in that role too, because 2 Brandon Newmans on the court would have been even more fun for me as a coach in a way. So that's one of kind of the early conversations that I start having with my guys last spring and even throughout the summer. Any questions so far? I know I've just kind of been talking, but if you have any questions or any kind of things I want to clarify, just trying to give some background on the process. So you plant the seeds early. You have a lot of tough conversations, and I think that's the thing, because as coaches, most of us we have to try to communicate with so many guys. But the tough conversations, I think, avoid a lot of the heartache and pain down the road, even though you have to be uncomfortable and say, hey, this is honest. You want honesty or do you want harmony? And well, I want honesty. I want to make sure I'm really honest with you. And even if that doesn't make you happy with me, I'm going to be truthful with you, and I'm going to do it in love. And because we have a relationship, you know that I'm not trying to hurt you, but I'm just trying to make the team doing what's best for the team, but also giving you the best chance to play, because I get it, you want to play. Let me see, where else are we? Okay, talked about the lines. So then as we start kind of giving them a line to get in, then summer comes around, and we'll work on those weaknesses and those areas of strengths that they can in the spring workouts. But then the summer is my time to really give kids a chance to try to see if they can do those roles, okay? And so we scrimmage the game, we play the games, we schedule games, and we want to make sure that I don't care if we win or lose in the summer. I want to evaluate players, say, all right, I think you could be the backup point guard. Well, I got to let the kid try to be the backup point guard in a game such situation that doesn't really per se matter to win or lose, and see if they can succeed or failure. And so that's something that we do a lot of in our summertime. We're playing the games on the weekends, going to super hoops, getting some shootouts, and getting our butt kicked in, and kind of going, all right, well, I thought you could do this. You couldn't. I thought you could do it. You can. Actually, I think you can do it better than I thought you could. And so that kind of helps the guys and helps the coaching staff see what they can do, what they can't do, and when it comes to fulfilling the roles that I envision for them. And obviously, you've got some misses and you've got some surprises along the way, okay? And then you continue to talk to them throughout the summer. Hey, we played this weekend. I thought you could do this. Let's reevaluate that role. I don't know if this is going to work for you. If you want to be a part of the team and you want to make the team, we got to find a different role for you to be able to fulfill your desire to be a part of the team. And then season rolls around, and this is when I've kind of learned and made some mistakes, but also done some things that I think have been very beneficial. When it comes to fall, we just keep doing our open gyms and workouts. But this year was the first year I ever did this, and partly I was forced onto it because our football team had a run to the state championship game, and so the season started prior to us getting our football players. But before tryouts happened, the week before tryouts, I'd never done this before. Maybe some of you guys have, but I just figured I needed to do it because I didn't really have a good plan of when I was going to do it, because I didn't know how long the season with football was going to last. But I had a preseason parent-player tryout meeting. And if you've never done it before, I would highly recommend it. Normally, in the past, we've made the selections, had cuts, and then had the parent meeting and gone over all the stuff, then talked and communicated about, team meals and all the stuff that we do as a program. But this year I did it a little different because we didn't have a team yet, and we weren't going to have one for maybe up to 3 to 4 weeks into the basketball season. So I brought everyone in that was planning. It was mandatory. If you're planning on trying out, you need to come to the tryout meeting. And I went over all the specifics and logistics of the tryouts. This is how we evaluate players. This is, what we're going to do. And that's a whole nother podcast on that topic. But the big thing that I stressed kind of to the senior parents, and I think I didn't really give you a background on this year, but I will in a second, is that there's 2 things that I can guarantee. I can guarantee that there was going to be injuries, because I've never had a season where there's not injuries. And I can guarantee you that no one is going to be happy with their playing time. Okay, those are the only things that I will guarantee. Everything else is kind of up for grabs. Win, loss, all the other things, and we're going to coach them hard. Well, kind of the rewind. as far as this year's season was going to be, I knew was going to be a very difficult and dynamic wise. And that being said, is because last year I obviously had a really good team, was graduated a lot. Well, I kept 4 juniors last year on JV because they're great young men, and they participated and done everything for 3.5, 4 years. However, I wasn't willing to play them much on JV last year. So they're juniors on JV. I promised them each a quarter on JV. They got to dress varsity, but they weren't going to play any on varsity. But I was going to give them 1 quarter to continue to play, but I wasn't going to also sacrifice all my sophomores' minutes on JV and development for these guys. They were going to have to basically develop themselves on their own and just be a part, and I offered them that situation. They all 4 accepted that role and all did a good job of it. And I think our Coach Prokop can help me, but I think our JV went undefeated last year. So and we've had a very good success with our JV teams. So that fast forward in that, now I've got 4 juniors plus and 2 more juniors that played last year for us. So I've got 6 potential seniors for this year's team. Okay. And I really couldn't say, well, these 3 are going to play and these 3 aren't. I knew 2 were going to play a lot and the other 4 were up in the air. So that was one of the reasons why I had this preseason tryout meeting, because first of all, I wasn't sure. They all were great young men. They all pursue excellence. They've come to everything. There was no kind of attitude issues with any of them. So I couldn't say, well, I'm going to keep you and you're going to be a bad apple. So, but I knew that even with that being said, that keeping 6 seniors on my varsity team, 2 of them were going to start and 4 of them were not going to play much at all. They were going to play limited minutes and also really back each other up. So like 2 of them were going to be the backup point guard. Well, that's not a very good situation when you're trying to have chemistry. However, they're all best friends. So now I've got best friends that are all competing for the same minutes and on the team and all wanting to play. Make things even kind of more muddy, I've got an incoming freshman this year, the 6'7" kid that's got a potential to be an Indiana All-Star that was going to play significant minutes. He had an older brother that as a freshman and sophomore played for me, and it was going to be a junior that was a Big Ten football player, 6'6" kid, 240, that just committed to play defensive end at IU. So you got all these crazy dynamics. You got 6 seniors, 4 aren't going to play a lot. 2, you've got another junior to be that had started all last year as a sophomore for me that was recovering from ACL surgery, but it was going to play amazing minutes. Got 2 seniors that are going to start. You got 2 juniors that are returning that played a bunch of minutes. You got a freshman that's going to play a bunch of minutes. Oh, yeah, and then my starting point guard is going to be a sophomore. Okay, so kind of the coaching nightmare. So essentially you got right there about 12 guys that are trying to play in 8 spots. 4 of them are going to be seniors that aren't going to play a lot. So just I knew it could be a recipe for disaster. I don't know a whole lot of coaches that would sign up for that. However, I kind of made the commitment to keep these guys because of what they had given to me, invested in me in my relationships with them, and if they were willing to kind of accept that minimum role. So we have the parent meeting, talk about it, and I know the parents aren't going to be happy because parents are never happy with the amount of playing time. And I even kind of quantified my reasoning with them that, hey, Brandon Newman last year was our leading scorer, averaged 29 minutes a game, and he wasn't happy with his playing time. He would have loved to play 32 minutes a game. Now, he didn't complain about it, but there were many games that we were up that he'd say, hey, coach, I'd like to keep playing. And it was like, no, you're coming out. And so if he's not happy with or disgruntled or would have liked to play more, do you think the kid that's begging to get in for a minute and a half is not going to be disgruntled? And so those are things we talked about with our parents, we talked about with our players, and just to try to do a lot of damage control and plant a lot of seeds early. This is where we're going. Okay, so that leads me to kind of the whole premise of what Coach Rhodes taught me, and with the player contracts that we do. And so you have the exit interviews in the spring. You work all the way to that point. You have your tryouts. We do all the kind of the legwork. We select the team. But you don't become a member of the team until you sign your player contract, okay? And so the player contract, something that Coach Rhodes taught me, and I got to give him a lot of credit for a lot of things I do, but this has been a benefit for me because it's a contract that we go over with every single player in our program, and they can't become a member of the program until they sign their contract, okay? And let me see, I think might be best, Jeremy, if I maybe just share the contract or just show the contract with you guys, and we can kind of talk about it a little bit, and you guys can ask questions. And it's probably different than what Coach Rhodes gave me 13 years ago, because I've added my own things, also my own kind of issues that were hot buttons for me. But let me share, if I can find this, share my screen. There it is. All right, you guys see that?
Yeah, we can see it.
All right, so this is my player contract team membership pledge. Okay, so we will meet after tryouts. We do this after a practice because we hold tryouts, but we got to keep going because we only have 14 days before our first game. So we'll sit down with each one of them and we'll talk about the pledge that they were going to make. And so basically, you'll do everything in your power to help the team be successful. You'll follow all Valpo training rules. You're being assigned a role, and you'll do your best ability to fulfill that role. The big thing I always say is understand that throughout the course of the season is that your role can change, okay? So I may say, hey, I only thought you were going to get 5 minutes a game, but now you're getting 10. I don't want you to come and complain to me and say, hey, coach, I agreed to only get 5 minutes and now you're giving me 10. But also, if I thought you were going to get 5 and now you're getting 0, you can't come and complain to me either. Okay, so it can't go one way and not the other way. So it's got to be both ways. You don't do anything to hurt the team. You refrain from negative comments, pictures, posts on social media. And that was one that we've obviously had to add over the years. You'll maintain a positive attitude, spread it through your team. Another big one I always say, minutes are earned by the way you practiced and maintained by the way you play. And I think that's one that I always stress in my parents' meeting, is because hey, if you're not practicing well, there's no way I'm going to give you game minutes. But if you don't play well in those game minutes, you're not going to maintain it, okay? And so if you, I always tell the parents that I get to see your kids play 100% of the time. You get to, if you're lucky, you get to see them play 20% of the season, and that's during game time, which is even less than that. So just because, the big, how many of us have had this as coaches? Your parent will come to you and say, hey, my son made one turnover and you took him out. And your point guard made that same turnover and you didn't do anything. And I always say, well, yeah, because last week I saw him make that same mistake 12 times and I coached him on it 8 times and he hasn't changed it and he did it in the game. And I think a lot of times parents don't quite understand that well, it's not that he only did it one time. That was the 13th time I've seen him do it this week. And I think that kind of hopefully helps them understand it's not just the game performance, it's actually practice performance that has way more bearing on their playing. And then understanding that failure to do any of these things are what could be grounds for removal. Then we select team, are you on the varsity, JV, freshman A, freshman B? And then this is the part right here that I think is the key for me, okay? Because this is now, those things before are all the standards ones. This is now where we start to really define their specific role that I envision them on playing this year, okay? So it might be, hey, I see you as a starter. I see you playing the point guard role, or I see you as the backup point guard, minutes earned as, or I see you as the good guy role, where you're going to play very little minutes. And so those are things, and if you end up using this, I'd be happy to share this with anyone that wants it. This is what kind of help you along the way, because you can, when you revisit this come February or come January with one of your players, you can say, hey, remember this role that you agreed to? And then bottom line is they put their name on it and they sign it. Okay? They sign this contract saying, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this to the best of my ability. And so especially with our freshman players. I know probably multiple times. Does anybody need to keep standing? So I'm going to stop sharing the page with you. But again, I can share it with you, Jeremy. You can share it with everyone, or however you want to do it.
Yeah, that'd be great. We'll just link it on our website.
Okay. But there's been numerous times that I have had my freshman coaches pull that out and meet with a player and talk about it. I'll never forget the last impression that Coach Rose kind of burnt in my memory. We were at Marion High School. This was the one year I was his assistant coach at Northrop, and he pulled the contract out in the locker room with one of the JV players and actually dismissed him from the team right there. Said, "You signed your name to this. You're not doing this. Thank you for your services." And he shook his hand and said, "You're done playing for us." And I was like, okay, that's serious. This is now. I think we maybe had to do that once or twice in my tenure at either Northrop or Valpo, but not very often, because most of the times it's just pulling them out and reminding them, hey, this is you lost your focus, but this sounded really good. Okay, in November when we talked about it, and now you're not so excited about it. So back to that role meeting, those conversations, it's very, very important, very, very important that you are specific, honest, and I always undersell, always. Okay, if I think a kid's going to get 8 minutes, I probably tell him he's going to get 5. If I think he's going to get 26 minutes, I probably tell him he's going to get 20. I undersell. I'm almost, and that's, as coaches, we always have to be spin doctors, and normally we spin it the other way. It's positive. Oh, this was a good loss. This is that. But this is the one time that I undersell it, and I've kind of have three kind of specific stories where I had these meetings, and the first one was my very first year as a head coach at Northrop. Okay, Coach Rhodes had left. I'd taken over for him, and I met with. I had a really young team. I was going to have 3 seniors on the team, and I went through kind of these roles with players, and I offered kind of the good guy role to one of my seniors. I said, I don't know how much you're going to play. These are kind of your areas that I think you need to work on, and I haven't seen you fix them this summer, and we've kind of tried to address them. And I offered that role to him, and he said no. He said, "Coach, appreciate it, but I don't want that role. And I'm going to just focus on my grades and just be a student." And so he did that. And had I not had that awkward conversation and just kind of said, hey, he wants to be on the team, he's trying out, I'll give him that, and I won't tell him the role he's going to play, he would have hated me by January, February, because he would have not known what he was getting into. And then for the rest of his life, probably hated me. Okay, well, he's a success story now for me because he's on this screen. Because we didn't burn that bridge. When I moved to Valpo, Coach Prokop was a grad student at VU and called me up and said, "Hey, Coach, I saw you're moving to Valpo. Do you need any help with the team or anything?" And of course, we always, as coaches, love free help. And so I offered him a volunteer position, and now he's gotten himself a teaching job and working hard. He's my freshman head coach. And but had I not had that awkward conversation with him and gone through these roles with him, and he probably would still be talking about that stupid coach at Northrop that screwed me over, and I could have been an all-conference and all-star, had I not had that really awkward conversation. 2 other times I've had that conversation with guys. Okay, one was at Northrop, one was at Valpo, and I undersold. One guy was Spencer Cowherd, who ended up being an All-American football player at St. Francis, but was going to play a role for me as a junior, but not a real big one. And he said, "Coach, appreciate it. I don't want the role." Well, 5 days of him not being at practice, I realized I'd made a mistake. That I was like, we miss him, and he's going to play more than I thought he did. So I went and found him and said, "Hey, Spencer, I messed up. Okay, I undersold. I didn't think you were going to play as much. Your absence from practice is very noticeable, and we could really use you. I want you to reconsider." right? Well, he came back and ended up being a major impact player for the next year and a half because I was willing to swallow my pride and say, hey, I screwed up. I evaluated you wrong. Didn't think you could help us, and you could. Same thing happened with another guy named Max at Valpo, where I didn't think he was going to play a whole lot. Was going to be the ninth or 10th man as a junior, and I told him, hey, I know you love tennis, but why don't you just focus on that? If you don't want to play that. And he said yes. And then 3 days later, I went and found him, and he said, well, give me the weekend to think about it, because he was, a 4.3 student in GPA, real smart kid, real analytical. And he said, I'm going to think about it. I'll process it. And so he came back and as a junior helped us win some games, and as a senior on the 2019 team played a major role. That was really important for us as our defensive stopper. So I think that's the other thing in these conversations. If you do make a mistake, be willing to admit it and go find it. But I'd much rather be open and honest with those guys. So throughout the course of the season, then I think it's really important to just continue to do damage control and continue to shine light on the benefits. So I do a lot of talking to my team. Obviously you can see I talk a lot, but I meet with my team before every practice for 5 minutes or so, and a lot of times I'll read the kind of the climate of the team and see, well, what's the issue or what. But one of the talks I talk about is the body, just our physical body, and about how important it is, and how many different parts we have as a body, and how certain body parts get a lot more credit. We always talk about, as coaches, you got to play with heart, and so the heart always gets a bunch of credit. Okay. But I always say, we never talk about the pancreas, okay? No one says, man, that kid's got a lot of pancreas. No, that kid just, he gives it all. But you can't live without a pancreas, right? And it plays a really important part of your body. And some of you guys are the heart, some of you guys are the pancreas, some of you guys are the eyes, some of you guys are the ears, and every single part is really important. So throughout the course of the year, I'll bring up that conversation just to kind of continue to remind guys, hey, this is important. Another thing that I know what it's like. I've played every single role. I was in 7th or 8th grade, I was the last man off the bench. Then I worked my way all the way up to be an all-conference starter player at Leo. And then I went back and was the role player at Bethel and was the last guy in and got in for 10 seconds. And I've been the star. So I can understand and relate to all those guys, knowing, hey, what it's like to be sitting on the bench looking at coach going, do I make eye contact with him? I hope he notices me. I want in. And so I try to just really be empathetic to them throughout the course of the year and say, hey, I get it. I understand that you want to be in more, and I appreciate you not. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be in more. That's not a bad thing, but they're also, you got to do your job, and even when you don't feel like it, you do it right. Another thing my coaches or my assistant coaches are great at trying to continue to take the temperature and put their arm around the guy that needs to be encouraged and say, hey, this is you're doing a great job. You're really valuable to us. And after games that we win or even that we lose, and someone, especially the big wins where maybe you only go 8 guys deep, because you don't trust it, or it just didn't work out. The 2 guys that really wanted, that normally get, hey man, I'm sorry to get you guys in. It just happened this way. I didn't plan on it. I was hoping to get you some minutes, but it didn't work. Or thank them publicly in front of the team. Hey, Johnny, I really appreciate you. I saw you on the bench cheering your heart out in today's big win. Yeah, because that's so important that you just try to validate them, even though, yeah, their heart's breaking because they want to play. The other thing, I've had to have parent meetings throughout the course of the year. Even had a couple this year where the parents, because they're the ones that will actually make it much harder on you guys. And you all know, you're all coaches. There's not, the kids will fall in line, but then when they hear that outside voice from mom and dad kind of talking about, the coach thinks she needs to play more, so sometimes you just got to have a meeting with a parent and say, hey, have you talked to your son about the role he signed and committed to? And he was okay with it, but you're not. But because he's okay with it, you need to let go. And I specifically pulled out the contract and said, hey, this is what your son committed to, and this is what he's getting. So I know you're not happy, but he's fine, but you got to just let him be fine. And so those are kind of conversations that I've had this year, even, and through the course. And again, I've had the player contract meetings at the beginning of the year, and have had parents come in and say, well, my son's not doing that role, and walk out the door. And I was like, okay, well, that probably is a good miss for me. That's why I'm glad I had this conversation right now. And dad stormed off with his son in November instead of being in the stands all winter long, complaining and downgrading the attack of the team, because it's hard enough to hold the team together when you're winning, because no one's happy anyways. Let me see, what else do I got? So I think the big thing kind of in closing to think about, or just to talk about, is that holding the team together is so important for coaches. I think one of the one reasons why seasons end, and also end earlier for a lot of teams, is because we as coaches don't hold our teams together. And what I mean by that, meeting with them, talking to them about their roles as a team. The number one reason I think we lose at the end of the year, if it's an even contested game, is that one team just isn't willing to fight for their team, because they're either just annoyed with their teammates, they're sick of the process, they're just tired. And so if you can create the chemistry where they're willing to die for each other and willing to fight, and not going to ever give up. One of my sayings at Valpo is, we don't lose, we just run out of time. And so we're going to fight until the end. And so if you can keep that mentality, you're going to win more games. You're going to have more postseason success, because there comes a point in every game where your guys have to look at each other and look at the bench and say, am I going to find a way? Am I going to dig down and make it happen? Or am I just going to kind of succumb and say, well, it's time to start thinking about spring sports, or just I'm ready to, And so we talk a lot about that, fighting for each other, and also our meetings with like I said, that stretch in February at Northrop, we had probably more team meetings, weekly, daily meetings, where practice is over, we're going in the locker room, we're hashing things out, why are you having beef with him? What's going on? Well, what does he do well? And we talking about the roles, and you're trying to just hold that team together, because that if you can keep the team together, you could have some success come postseason. And so I would just really encourage you guys to do that, even though we're all tired and worn out in February. That's one of the big things that I found, is that you just keep meeting with your guys, keep talking to them. I have a lot of individual conversations in my office with players throughout the day. Fortunately, I have a lot of them are my student aides, so I can just say, hey, how you doing? What's going on? Do you understand? And they can share their heart with me, but also it just doesn't have to be about basketball, because if you have that relationship with them and you have that trust with them, then they're going to maybe not like what they're getting from you, but they're going to at least know, hey, I got the best interest, and I got a heart for you, and my heart breaks for you, but we're going to do what's best for the team. Let me see. Any questions? I know I've just been kind of rambling on.
Coach, I guess my question would be, and it's to you, but it's to everybody, then what are you going to do this summer to develop their roles because of, COVID-19? And so that gets me to the second part of the question. Are you going to try to play games in July if we finally get to work out with our kids? And I'll pose that same question to everybody else. Have you guys thought about that? What are you going to do in July? Are you just going to work out? Are you going to be able to work out? And are you going to try to play games or just work your kids out?
Yeah, to answer your question, Kerry, I don't think we're going to have a July personally. I'm no expert, but it's hard for me to fathom us being able to get in the gym and do the things that we normally do. So I think we're all kind of a little behind the 8 ball. We won't have our normal kind of June and July that we're used to, the summer camps and all stuff. I just don't anticipate it. So for me, fortunately, I return a lot of guys that are already in significant roles. So I've got my guys kind of already idea. Now they're not going to get a chance to model those roles, and so it's going to be probably a bumpier start than normal. I also laid out rules that we've already talked about. We've been doing Zoom meetings, basically individual development. That you guys probably are all trying to do stuff. One thing that at Valpo that we've done, we have Canvas, which is our online platform for educational services that all our classes are through. So my assistants and I, we developed the Canvas course just for basketball. And we've opened that up for K through 12th grade, anyone that's in our district, with workouts and courses and things that they can get on and do to try to create an online community that's not just here's something on Twitter or here's something on Instagram or YouTube. So that's a little more intimate just for our group, and that they can kind of, here's a workout, here's a link to a video of the workout if you need to see it, here's a daily workout, here's some drills you can do, here's some conditioning ability stuff. And so that's kind of the platform that we've kind of tried to figure out. Well, it's not going to be normal. It's going to be back like when we were all in high school and back in the day, where you got a ball and a buddy and you went out and did a workout, and that's how you got better at basketball, and you found a pickup game somewhere in a park. Well, that's unfortunately, I think, what this summer is going to look like for most of us. I'd love to hear what other people are doing.
And hey, Coach, it's Coach Varga. I think for me personally, it's pretty hard. Obviously, a lot of my kids don't have access to a hoop or anything like that, or especially not with the parks taking hoops down and things of that nature. I know we've tried to do the workout stuff and make a Google Classroom and make that stuff available. Yeah, I don't. I was losing 3 seniors and losing guys that are pretty much 75% of my scoring and production. I like what you're saying. That I think a big portion of what we're going to be doing in the next coming weeks is that role. Where do you fit in that role, and individually Zoom meeting with those guys and talking about their role. I really like at the end of your contract, you had a specific role and have them sign it. So we're just going to be doing a lot of self-awareness stuff and kind of working on that for us. And yeah, like you said, I don't think we're going to have much of a summer going on. And I don't even think, getting back to the fall, it's going to be even normal. So, I mean, for us, it's mainly just working on that mental aspect that you're talking about, and just, gathering yourself and being a part of the team and where you see yourself fitting in next season. So this is very helpful, and I thank you for, presenting.
My pleasure, Ryan. I think one thing, you plant the seeds in the roles, you start kind of giving guys ideas, and then, we don't have to cut a ton of guys at Valpo, because a lot of them will just kind of cut them self-select. We're going, I'm not really interested in that role. So obviously we don't offer the role to them until they make the team, but we kind of just give them a guidance. Another thing, I've shared my contract with my football coach, and what they added to it that I haven't added, and just is that they also added a third line, and it's a parent signature. And they would actually send the contract home that the kid had to have their parents sign also, saying, at least acknowledging this was the role that the kid accepted. I haven't done that yet, haven't had a need to, but that's definitely something that maybe depending on the climate of your program, and also really more the climate of your parents. I'm pretty fortunate. Valpo parents, for the most part, are pretty supportive and understand the process, but it may be something that could help you too. Kerry, what are you doing?
I will echo what your football coach said. We have our parents sign as well as the athlete, just to help them, support them. Now, we're not as in-depth as you are about their role at that point in time of the season, and obviously things can change, and you make them aware of that. But I had the same conversation with a young man this past fall, just a good story, because most of them are bad with parents. And he decided not to play like one of your young men chose. And so the next day I've got an email, and it was from the parents. And it was the nicest email, complimentary, that I have ever received, or nearly received as a coach, and it was from a kid that, we told him his role wasn't going to be very much, and he decided not to play. So I think it goes back to the honesty and the trustworthiness that you've mentioned. And yeah, we do have our parents sign. So I think that helps. I'm not saying I've never had any conversations with parents, but I think it can not hurt at all.
Barak, I have absolutely no idea. This is Aaron Wolf from Northwood. What we're doing this summer, I don't think I'm going to plan anything until June 1. Like they're wanting us to kind of like in July, kind of get an idea of what we would do. But I think I'm going to wait until June 1 to even consider that stuff. I got a question for you. Do you do anything intentionally to give players value? And we're talking about those kids that might be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yeah, no, I think the probably the most intentional, one thing I try to do a lot is read body language. Okay, so you can tell a lot of time kid walks into the gym or before practice, what's he look like? So I think intentional conversations happen all the time for me. And so even specifically, like I had a young man that I knew was going to play backup role. But we started talking in the spring and even this fall, and he was a great young man. Actually, I had some weird dynamics even more so because two of my seniors' parents were Division I basketball players, and they were both, their sons ended up having one had some injury issues, so he didn't develop as much. One was kind of multi-sported, so he didn't develop as much. But the one from day one this fall, I knew he wanted to be a starter. And so, he was just like, yeah, I really want to start and I think I can really help the team. And I'm just thinking, I don't see that. I don't see as a starter. I think you could play a role for us. So just kind of helping redirect him intentionally going, all right, if I know this kid, that's his heart set on starting. And I know probably the only time he's going to be able to start is senior night. This is going to be a major issue if I don't start and kind of intentionally planting seeds of like, this is where I can see help in. You can't just say in the conversation in September, you're not going to start, right? Because you're not, first of all, you don't know that for sure. You may think that, and he may beat somebody out. But so that's kind of the big intentional conversations that I have are helping them see what I see, explaining to them why I see it this way, and then intentionally leading them to an area that they can see fulfilled. Like I said, those intentional times where I'm pointing out what they're doing well, even maybe when they don't, no one else is noticing that. Hey, I saw you in practice land and say, hey, this kid, he just had his best practice ever. Okay. But also, saying why, not just because. If you just say the best practice ever, well, no, you were diving, you took care of the ball better than you ever did. And then, hopefully that translated into a little more playing time. And the young man that actually could have been very disgruntled, he played major minutes or important key minutes for us in the sectional championship game when our point guard fouled out. He was coming in and, just even that sectional championship game, we were down 8 with 4.5 minutes to go. Against Chesterton, and we're fortunate enough that our guys just dug in and said, hey, we're not quitting, we're not giving up, and we turned them over and we made a run, and we're fortunate enough to win that game. And this kid that could have been very frustrated the whole year because he wasn't a starter, and he was essentially playing behind a junior and a starting point guard that was a sophomore. He stayed on board because of our intentional conversations and was in the last 2 minutes of the game in that key moment and helped us. And I got a picture of him holding the sectional championship ball crying, and those are the type of things that's like, oh, it could have been a disaster year where all these seniors turned on me and the parents. And my wife even specifically told me, I think in December, I don't think there's a single player or parent that's happy with you right now. And she was probably right because they were so frustrated with everything that was, just because even at that point, I was letting a lot of guys, I was playing 12 guys because of still trying to figure out who could, who couldn't, what was going to happen. And I can remember going to Warsaw and Coach Ogle goes, are you going to keep playing 12 guys? How are you doing that? And I said, I don't know how I'm doing. This is crazy. but I got to at least give them an honest effort to see who can do it and who can't, because back to what Ryan asked, I think it was, how are you going to do it this summer? I know it was Carrie. Some of the things didn't get seen in the summer, partly because my one returning starter from last year, Colton Jones, tore his ACL, so he missed all summer. So I've got my one returning starting guard gone all summer because he's out with a torn ACL, and so now I'm piecing everyone in. So I really didn't even get a true feel for who could and who couldn't and who was going to play backup roles, which also set up some specific, you got a kid that's going to play 20 to 30 minutes, and then in summer you got all these guys that are trying to fight for minutes, getting maybe more minutes than you even wanted to. I mean, that's the other thing. In the summer, sometimes if you've offered a kid a backup role, you let them play a little bit backup role in the summer. So I kind of went all over with that, Aaron, but that's essentially my thoughts on that area.
Hey, Coach, Will Kramer here. First of all, I was a Bethel basketball summer camper when you were at Bethel, so a lot of good memories. My question is, you talked about the contract and how if a player does not adhere to the contract, that they could be removed from the team. So I guess my question is it like a 3-strike rule? Like, how do you determine who gets removed? Have you ever had to do that? What's that look like?
So normally, you've got an issue. This kid is just, he's being a locker room lawyer. He won't do it. He's frustrated. Maybe he's, and if it's kind of the minor stuff, all right, then we meet with them and talk to them and say, hey, you lost track. And so we don't really have like a set, now this is strike number 2. It's just kind of, all right, we'll give you a chance to fix it. All right. If you can't fix it, then we may have to part ways. And we're real specific about that. And then if it continues on, then we will probably revisit and say, hey, we've given you a chance and we've seen no change in behavior. In fact, it's probably gotten worse because you're actually choosing it and we've identified and you're continuing to do it. So that tells us that you really aren't planning on changing it. Okay. Now, if it's I hate the coach posted on social media because he's an idiot, then it may just be, hey, there's no strikes. It just might be, this is just too detrimental to the success of the program, and we're going to move on. And I think it helps the AD. The big thing is you got to make sure you really communicate with your administrators, because what's the first thing that's going to happen when that kid gets dismissed from the team? Their parents, if you're lucky, they're going to call you, but they're probably going to call up the chain first because they're going to be mad. And then, fortunately at Valpo, our chain is that our ADs won't even talk to you unless they've spoken with the coaches. But they're going to go. So if you can say, hey, this is what's been going on. This is how we've dealt with this. This is what we've done to address it. And it's no change in behavior. And we really feel like it's time to part ways. Coach Prokop, did you part ways with somebody this year? Or did he just kind of quit himself? I think we addressed it.
We addressed it. Well, he decided he wanted to address it right before one of your varsity games, which made things easier because you were there. And so it was not the best timing for him. So we addressed it, and he said he'd come back to practice, and then he never showed back up and said his mom made him stop playing.
So, yeah. And what I found with the contracts, if you go over them specifically enough, you won't have to cut as many kids because kids will cut themselves, and it gives them an out. Because what are they doing in the locker room? They want to be able to say, well, I quit. They don't ever say, coach cut me because I wasn't good enough, And so it's the same type of thing. We gave the kid didn't want to say, I've got kicked off the team because I'm not making good choices in the classroom and I'm not doing the things that I'm supposed to do on the court, and I'm not, he can now say, well, I quit the team. And so and I don't care. The headache was removed for us. I don't need the power trip to say, well, we kicked you off. So I think that's the one thing that we give the kids a lot of chances to fix things, but also give them the power to move on. And then if we have to, but not very often have we really had to remove a whole lot of kids. We've had to cut some kids early, and that's the same concept. You've got to tell tell the AD and your principals why you cut kids and why, and I think that just helps, because then when somebody's complaining or something, they can say, this has happened. In fact, this year, one of my senior parents was a little disgruntled, and the backstory is 3 years ago, we cut my principal's son, okay, which is a bold move for anyone. She was an assistant principal at the time, and she's a great lady, and her comment was that, hey, if he's not good enough to make the team, I don't want him on the team, and if this is the worst thing that ever happens to him, he's got a really good life. So when the parent kind of wanted to say something to her, she said, I don't know what your problem is. He cut my son. And so it's good to have good administration backing you up, but it also helped that we've really communicated well with her and with my AD on every line, because the worst thing you want to do is have surprises when it comes to your ADs and administrators, because that's when they're trying, what's going on? Why is this happening? So anything that you think's potential pitfall or fire that could get to them, I always am making a text or a phone call saying, hey, this is what's happening. We just met with this kid, told them, and you know which ones are going to be, this is a conversation that's not going anywhere. This one needs to be addressed, and they're going to keep going. So this year I called parents. I had a senior that was struggling that I thought I called the parent and said, hey, what's going on with your son? I'm about ready to bench him. And I've met with him, talked to him. I can't quite figure out, do you know what's in just kind of that. He switched because of those conversations and that late night phone call to dad, and just had a great second half of the season, and made the key steal in the sectional championship game to kind of spark us to win it. So those are back to those key conversations, intentional conversations, and you're constantly thinking about which things needs addressed to fix.
Hey, Coach, I've got a question. You guys are probably pretty in tune with the freshmen that you have coming in, and I assume that you do the contracts as well. For us, I would see that part of it really a challenge with our feeder program not as in place, and you probably is familiar with that. So is your tryout process a little longer so you get more of a chance to see, or what does that look like at that level?
Well, I mean, being Fort Wayne Community Schools, I can remember standing by the front door on the first day of school, watching kids walk in to see might be a basketball player, because you had no idea who was coming.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep. No question.
Like, you're tall. Do you play basketball? What year are you? Like that was.
Or I thought you were going somewhere else.
Oh, you're back? Oh, okay. Well, that's great. This could help, that struggle is, I don't miss that. And so obviously, but we still would do contracts with our freshmen there, right? They were probably a little more vague, but for freshmen, you're still trying to figure out who's going to grow, who's going to develop. Unfortunately, in Fort Wayne, you probably got to move the freshmen, if they're any good, to JV, or mom's going to transfer them anyways. But I think you can still you can use the contract with them and kind of be a little more vague. Hey, I see you as a point guard. Okay. Now, minutes as earned. And I don't know exactly and that goes back to Carrie saying, hey, sometimes it's really hard to be specific about roles come November. You may have to revisit that and say, hey, it's to be determined a little bit. This is what the team needs. Can you do this? I don't know. And that's probably what we're going to have to do this fall or this winter if we don't have a summer. We know our freshmen a lot better than a lot of people, because our feeder, we got 2 middle schools and they're all dreaming to be Valpo Vikings, and we know them all. But you still don't quite know who's going to develop. I know Coach Prokop, I think you thought your leading scorer was going to be one kid, and he ended up not playing a whole lot. Just because in fall open gyms, he was dominating. It was like, wow, this kid's I really think. So we have misses too. And I think the same thing, you can still use it, because just the sense of accountability. And for freshmen, you just want them to not act like idiots, especially in Fort Wayne Community Schools, because they've just been able to get away with so much, and they feel so much of an entitlement, and you have and so if you just have the standards, you just meet these standards, we're going to be okay. The one thing, fortunately for for Valpo, I haven't had to kind of put like a required GPA like this, but that might be something somebody adds to the contract, because we had to do so many study tables at Northrop. It was nuts. But, like my lowest GPA on my varsity this year was a 3.6. So like it's different. We have our own now. That's one of the reasons why we do horrible start Christmas break, because my guys actually take school serious. Finals week, they study so hard. They're so drained. They're so stressed out. And then they were like, well, we got to go play games over Christmas. I'm hey, yeah, that's what we do for fun. But so I think you just kind of cater to what you need and what works for you. But the contracts are so just anything. It just makes it a big deal. I even have a manager application process. So like for our managers, you can't just be a manager. You have to pick up an application. You have to fill it out, and then I'll decide if I'm going to hire you or not. And so that gives you a chance to say, sorry, I know you're a girl that wants to be on a manager just because you like being around young boys, and I'm gonna, I don't tell them that. I just say, sorry, you didn't meet the qualifications to make the manager job, And so anything you can add a standard to that they have to meet or give you and I think it's going to help you, especially with freshmen coming in Fort Wayne Community Schools. It was helpful for us to be able to just, hey, you've never been held accountable to anything.
You said, the standards are going to be more important than the role definition, because that'll be so difficult to determine anyway. But meet these standards. I like that.
Yeah.
Any other questions here as we wrap things up? Awesome. Well, Coach, if you don't mind, I'll get that contract from you, and then even the manager application form I think would be awesome to share out as well, and we'll get that on the website. And this was incredible. So thank you very much for your time.
Well, Jeremy, thank you. I'm glad that you're doing this. It's something that I really enjoy myself. I enjoy mentoring and helping coaches. In fact, in my downtime of not being able to coach live, I've kind of started working on my own project. And so it may be something that it's going to be released here soon. I'm calling it Championship Standards. And we're going to have I've already got kind of my Twitter and Instagram set up and have my domain, but it's going to be a mentorship for coaches to kind of, and eventually I think my wife and I are going to write a book, because we've been married 21 years and all the pitfalls and trials we've had to go through. So want to help coaches and mentors. So that's going to be kind of the same deal. It's going to be different than this, but it may be something that guys that enjoy this would enjoy it also. And a lot of the same nuggets, what we just presented is going to be one of the chapters in the book. But I will definitely happily give out anything really to mentor and help us all be better at our craft. And so thank you. I've appreciated what you've done. Enjoyed learning myself from the stuff that you've posted. So thank you, everyone that's participated. Appreciate your time. If there's no other questions, I'll email you that information, Jeremy.
Okay.
I'll send it to you in 2 Word documents and probably 2 PDF documents, so you can show it. But also, if anybody wants to modify it, they can too.
Perfect. All right, Coach. Well, thank you very much.
Yep. Anybody have anything else specifically, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll help in any way I can. So best of luck, stay safe, and we'll be in touch, guys.